Okay. 2 minutes and then we can just start. I don't have to press anything else.
That's correct.
Okay.
Bill.
Roach, I'm a health science teacher at Powell High School. I'll let Catherine introduce herself.
I'm Catherine Bledsoe. I'm a work-based learning coordinator for our special populations at Maryville High School.
So our goal today, and we have a short amount of time, so we probably won't get to all of it, but it is available for you to have access to it, like he said. And basically our goal is to kind of talk about SPED students in health science and work-based learning placements. And I want to be clear as far as what sort of SPED student we're talking about. Catherine, do you want to reiterate on that for a minute since you're more of a SPED teacher?
Yeah, definitely. So the students that we're talking about that are going to be in a health science placement are going to be more of your students who we're going to focus on today might be on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum, or might have a specific learning disability. However, when we're talking about these disabilities, we are not talking about students with significant disabilities, cognitive wise. And again, we're going to go into reasons for that and kind of solutions that we can find. So we're talking about a student who's on a regular diploma track. They're in health science as a completer. This is their path that they've chosen. So not what we would probably think of as your typical like CDC student. That's not at all what we're intending the focus of this to be on. Those students, though, we will kind of talk very briefly about during this presentation in terms of there are other ways you can get those students included in a health science placement. It's just probably not going to be through your CTE department in this way, but there's a variety of settings. I know that I have students placed in dietary, in supply and chain, in laundry. There's other options for those students as well. So we always want to make sure that we're including them, but primarily for the purpose of this presentation, we're really focusing on a student who has an IEP, they're receiving special ed services, but they're going to have what you would consider like more of a mild disability.
Okay. So just a question that we want you to reflect on throughout is how comfortable are you in making accommodations for your health science special education students? So myself, I've not had a whole lot of experience, but I do know that I have, in my introductory courses, I've had, IEPs and even into my tier 2 courses. And a lot of times there are those gray areas and I don't know how to fully accommodate them and make sure that they're ready and they're set to go on if they wanted to do a work-based learning in health science. So just keep that in mind. Some things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about common struggles with health science placements. We're going to overview autism and specific learning disability. We're going to, he mentioned that there are some polls. I don't know if we'll have time for all of them, but I've put together some scenarios and I'll tell you kind of how to get there. But each scenario deals with a SPED student and we're going to reply and talk about kind of some things that maybe you can think of that you would do. This is not a one size fits all. Definitely it is more just to kind of get you learning and to start to make a plan for those students when that comes across. So your goals: provide a brief overview of autism. Catherine is going to speak on these because I am not a SPED teacher. Recognize common challenges in autism students. Provide a brief overview of specific learning disability and the common challenges that they may face in a health science placement. And then also network with other educators to create practices and accommodations for special ed students. So I'm going to let Catherine brush over, brush over autism and specific learning disability. And then we're going to talk about some of the things that these students would have trouble with in health science.
Again, so I think we're all familiar with what autism is and what a specific learning disability is, but we just wanted to do an overview to kind of talk about some common challenges and ways that we could find solutions to those. So before we jump into that part, let's just look at what autism is. Autism is a developmental disorder that's going to cause some challenges with social, behavioral, and communication. I always say if you've met an autistic student, then you've met one. The spectrum is very wide. And so, again, like Nicki said, not all, one shoe does not fit necessarily. However, with autism, some common characteristics that they have: difficulty making eye contact. They a lot of times want to be isolated, not necessarily working with others, have trouble understanding people's feelings, sometimes even understanding their own feelings and how to communicate those. May echo words or phrases, so a lot of repetition to get them through tasks that they do daily. Routine can be a big thing. They really thrive with the schedule. Sometimes when things are thrown off, that can be a deterrent to their day. And then have unusual reactions to sounds or smells. Something that we may not even hear, see, or smell, really they're picking up with their senses, and it can be aggravating to them. So those are some of the challenges that they have. Going into that, they also a lot of times don't have the same opportunities, unfortunately, as their peers. And some of the ways that research, according to the CDC, has seen that is there's a lot of high rates of unemployment with people on the spectrum, a low participation in education behind or after high school, so they're not necessarily going on to a post-secondary. Limited opportunities is the best way to say it for community involvement, for socializing with peers. A lot of us outside of work and outside of family time have other ways that we're able to connect with others and socialize, and those can be really challenges for them to find a group that they fit into. And then the majority of them continue to live with relatives and family members. And also something too that, again, it's not for all of them, but a lot of times transportation goes in with independent living as well. So those are some things that they don't always, individuals on the spectrum don't always have the same opportunities as the rest.
This is a video. I am too afraid to play it because I'm afraid that something will mess up. But I noticed that some of you in your chat said you couldn't see the PowerPoint. I'm working on that right now in the files section. For some reason it didn't upload. But I would encourage you to go back and watch this on your own time. It was a really good video just talking about students with autism, what they wish that they could tell people around them. Because I think there is, definitely a stigma, or just a lot of people just don't know how to handle or approach that. So I thought it was a really good video. I'm going to let Catherine talk about specific learning disability, and then we're going to talk about some common problems.
Again, specific disabilities. This is a huge range too. We're not talking about the student who is in high school and is still functioning on a first or second grade reading level, for instance. This is a student who is probably getting RTI. They're being progress monitored, but they still are maybe a grade level or two behind. So they're able to still comprehend a lot of your material and your curriculum. So a lot of things to look for with specific learning disabilities: oral and written communication skills to be aware of, mathematical skills. There's going to probably be difficult in reading, spelling, and speaking. So those are all things that when we're talking about solutions for scenarios, we really want to focus on those skills and meeting them where they are. But those are good things to keep in mind.
All right. So we're going to talk about some challenges, and then Catherine's going to kind of talk about some solutions from her point of view. So the first thing that really stuck out to me was communication and empathy. Obviously, if you have a student in a clinical setting, they have to learn the professional trait empathy. That is extremely important just to be a good healthcare provider. So sometimes that can obviously be a challenge with your autism students. Some of the things that they struggle with, being very proactive, talking to a supervisor, obviously talking to peers, and then developing that relationship with the student and also with a patient. So some things that we kind of thought about that would be more solutions, and I'll let Catherine talk about this more, is communication lesson plans in education. We all, before they go to clinical, they have to pass a test on communication. Okay, that's obvious. That's for every student. It may be more intense for this student. And just because they can do something on a test, a written test, doesn't mean that they can communicate appropriately. All teenagers have trouble communicating. They're all nervous before they go into that setting with real life patients. Patient scenarios, have them role play, get them ingrained in that situation. Assigning a strong communicator with the student in the setting in a classroom. Maybe you pair that student with someone who excels and they are kind of like clinical buddies and they go together. I don't know how, I don't know how everyone's program works, but that may be a good solution, someone that the student feels comfortable with. And then if possible, maybe you assign that student a consistent patient. That's not always possible, but I know that if you're like nursing education and you're going into a long-term care facility, most of the time they continue to be there. So someone that they're familiar with, letting them get used to that person and developing a relationship, start setting that pathway for them to learn how to build relationships. Obviously, when they get out to the real healthcare world, it's not going to be like that. But we have to kind of start somewhere and kind of build upon that. They got to do some work. Catherine, do you have anything to add for communication and empathy?
No, I think that's a good overview. And I think too, like Nicki said, you're going to, I'm sure in the healthcare setting, have numerous patients that you're overseeing at one time in particular, but there still are long-term things that these students can do where they're going to be able to have consistent patients in different settings. So not all settings that we're placing kids in potentially to be a CNA or anything are going to be, a different patient every single day. That might change a little bit, but if they're going into a long-term care facility or a nursing home, they're really a lot of times going to be maybe able to be paired with a consistent person. So I think that's key. And the thing that I've seen most beneficial with our health science teachers, they've done a great job of really looking at how they're grouping the student, because it does make such a difference when maybe a peer is stronger in communication. And if they're modeling that, then that's going to be your expectation.
Yeah. The next problem that I anticipated was reading. And when I thought about reading, I thought about a few different things in health science. Interpreting medical terminology. All of our students have problems with that from the beginning anyway. And then you take someone with a learning disability or, they're going to have possibly more trouble interpreting those really odd looking word parts. Reading patient charts about patient information and then interpreting that. That's a skill that, adolescents or high school students have trouble with. Obviously, someone with a learning disability is going to have trouble doing that too. Understanding anatomy and pathophysiology. Pronunciation of medical terminology. And proper spelling with report write-ups. Again, these are things that just are, student without accommodations has challenges with. So then we're adding someone who has extra challenges. So basically, you just have to think about the things that we do for our students who don't have accommodations. We're going to do the same thing, but we may have to add some things onto it, have more frequent checks, have more, they need more support. They need an extra person or a peer to help them, and that's okay. So having weekly quizzes, written or verbal, over medical terminology. Some students with a learning disability, you could give them a written test and they can't pass it, but then you go over and you talk to them about it and they can tell you everything. It just depends on their disability, I'm sure. Have the student associate word parts with visual meanings. I did this in my health science class and it seems so basic, but it worked really well. And I'll show you what that looks like. So I made them in a group. They had their own Excel sheet and they took the word part and the meaning, and then they did a picture. And it helped them tremendously just to associate a visual with the word part. Some other things that I've done in the past is music. I make them do like a midterm rap and they rap it for the class. That's a fun way to get people comfortable with their groups. I let them keep the same groups throughout the semester. and then the winner got a prize. It just kind of helps them get familiar with those words in more of a fun way. Have some questions require spelling. So on your test, don't just make it a multiple choice true, false. Make them spell out some of those words. They need proper spelling is extremely important, you know, and I mean, you have to tell them it's memorization. That's what it is. It's how it is in healthcare. You memorize a lot of things, you know, types of drugs and things like that. We talked about verbal tests. Morning, afternoon tutoring with a strong peer. Maybe you have some students that excel. Give them extra credit. Let them be peer tutors for this to get that student some extra help. And then just hands-on learning activities. And Catherine, you can speak a lot more about this. I don't know if some SPED students do a lot better with more interactive hands-on than, you know, if you're sitting there lecturing. I don't know. I guess it depends on the disability, but
I think a lot of it depends on the disability and the student. Something that you spoke about was, you know, a lot of nursing ed is memorization and memorizing. Well, that can be hard for a lot of kids depending on their study skills, whether they're regular ed or special ed. But I think like even with a lot of your autistic students, that's a huge strength that a lot of them can memorize things. And so for them, that's something that maybe becomes even more natural than your other students that it does for hands-on activities. A lot of times, you know, when kids can touch it, see it, there's going to be then a new background knowledge that you're able to tap into. Like, okay, this makes sense. It's more of an aha moment of it all coming full circle. So that's always great. Something that I have to say, always kudos to our health science teachers. They do a really great job of even pairing, like if you have a student in maybe a lower level introductory course, they do a great job of even utilizing, a lot of students want to be a TA. And so they'll use their TA maybe for a block who's also a clinical student or something, and they will have then become a strong peer to answer questions, have additional support for that student. So I've seen that work extremely well. So it's not just always when they're in the class, but sometimes outside of the class, they're even able to do more one-on-one work with them. That takes a little bit off the instructor's plate, but also allows them to engage with their peers, which sometimes they're more motivated to excel with.
okay. Bill, you're saying that nobody can see the PowerPoint. Is there something that I should be doing differently?
Do they also have access to see the PowerPoint in our files? They can pull it up?
Yes. So I'm not sure why we can't see it, but in files, there is a PowerPoint uploaded. And if you just go under files, like he said, and it's called presentation, and we are currently on slide number
or 12.
12. Yeah, we're about to talk about mathematical skills. I don't know if that helps or not, but it's right here. It says will not let me open the files. Huh. Okay, mine open, and I tried it on 2 different computers. Okay, I can try after, I can try making it into a PDF also and uploading that. That way you have it.
I'm sorry, I was still muted. There should be a share screen button down there at the bottom of your Zoom window. Is that turned on?
It's green, yes.
All right, click on that once.
Okay. Okay, and here we go.
All right, now under screen sharing, you may need to select the actual PowerPoint window.
Okay.
So click on screen sharing, and should give you a list of the windows you've got open. Select your PowerPoint. No, we're still just getting your video.
Yeah, okay, so Microsoft PowerPoint, clicked on it, share.
That's it.
There we go.
Can you see it?
Although what I've got now is I've got your
Login.
web browser. If you will minimize your web browser and select PowerPoint on your desktop, that should do it.
Okay. Oh. Now it just went away, didn't it?
Yep. Click share screen again, and it should give you an option of the different things you've got open. Be sure to select the PowerPoint and not the website.
Yeah, the PowerPoint's not coming up now as an option, just desktop.
All right, go ahead and share desktop.
Okay.
And now run PowerPoint.
Okay.
And now select the slide you want. All right, and probably you want, I'm not familiar with the Macintosh version, but if you right click on that, you should get an option to, Macs don't right click, do they? There should be somewhere an option to start from current slide.
I think that's under slideshow, Nikki.
Almost certainly.
If you go to slideshow at the top.
Okay. I have a little pop-up that's not letting me.
What's it say?
It's my Zoom tab, and it just won't move to where, oh, here we go. Can you see it now?
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry about that.
Okay, sorry. So mathematical skills, again, vital sign calculation, interpreting those results, weight, height, reading and interpreting graphs and charts, and then charting time intervals were things that I could think of automatically off the top of my head that I knew someone would have trouble with. So I would assume that all of your students, before they go into clinical, they take a test over vital signs. Again, that is normal memorization. They know, the ranges, what is abnormal, what is normal. That's a memorization tool. Like Catherine said, the autism students may excel at that. Reflect on scores and individually work with the student and go over each question that's missed and figure out what's going on, why they're missing it. Is there a certain thing that they don't understand? Again, this is not real, when they get out and they have their job, there are other skills that they're going to have to be more independent in. But for right now, we're creating a basis. For a clinical site, and I thought this was a good idea, create a red, yellow, and green light chart. So something that maybe you make, or maybe the student makes it, or maybe your top tier student makes it for extra credit. And it's a little chart, and you can laminate it and then carry it in their pocket, and you give them certain ranges, and then, red, yellow, green. Okay, so red, that's a major, like, we need to go to the nurse right now. Yellow, I need to go to the nurse and report this, because I'm in between, I'm not really sure, green light, okay, we're in the normal ranges, we're good to go. And then, also that chain of command, well, who do I go to next? Do I go to my teacher? Do I go to, my mentor that I'm shadowing, and things of that sort? Catherine, do you have anything else about math?
No, I think that's great. That covers it.
Difficulty in a fast-paced environment, that's all students, obviously, but as you know, you have about 6-8 weeks or so to get your students ready for that work-based learning placement. So it is just one thing after another. So that is obviously difficult. Break down skills and objectives into smaller steps. Maybe this student, if they're really struggling and they can't take in the whole chunk in class, maybe they have some homework that they do. Maybe they have some at home. So that's where your relationship with your parents comes in. Maybe they do half in the classroom, half at home, to kind of break that up a little bit more. And give them a checklist. I've done this with students before with IEPs. they have like a little checklist for the day, like you did this, 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 and then I sign it, and then their mom or dad signs it and they bring it back. It's like that accountability piece for them. Give them a reflection sheet. So sometimes, you know, what do they feel like they're struggling with? That can tell you a lot right there. More time, we know all of this by reading an IEP. Individually work with the student to create an action plan. Again, that's where your parents are going to come into. So if you know that the student's going to struggle with, I don't know, vital sign ranges, then okay, well, let's break up some of it. Let's do some of it here. Let's do some of it at home. You know, and maybe hopefully you have, they have good parental support to where they can, you know, help kind of give some support to the student at home and make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then, you know, tutoring again, if I know that things are just absolutely crazy, especially this year, who knows what's going to be with, and, you know, the last thing you want to think about is morning and afternoon tutoring, but that may be something, maybe you could do it virtually. I don't know. Everything is just crazy this year anyway. Do you have anything else to help with fast pace?
I think too, as we talk about these things, the big thing too, like we keep saying, okay, this is not one of the biggest questions I get, our roadblock is like, well, what are we preparing them for? If we're giving all these accommodations, it's not going to be that way when they exit and they leave us. And I think the important thing to remember too, that is critical in work-based learning settings, a lot of our students that have been successful, yes, they've had tons of accommodations, and yes, they've had a lot of supports in place. But more importantly, they've built a connection not only with that teacher, but with their work site. And so a lot of times the work sites even, they'll, you know, get to know our students over a time period. And a lot of them will still, you know, go on to hire them to be a CNA or something. And they might know these things, but they also feel more comfortable addressing them because they're seeing you as the teacher address them and help modify. So I think that's critical in not forgetting that there's a huge connection piece for those students too, to build those relationships on site. I know we get tied into curriculum and we get tied into, you know, checking lists and making sure they have those skills. And that's so vital. That's so important. But I also think there's a lot of positive that can come from this too, for both the employer as well as the classroom.
Yeah. And another thing I just thought of, and I remember when I was in college, we had he was a pre-pharmacy student and he had autism. And one thing I still remember it to this day, he was brilliant. And we heard screaming down the hallway, like screaming and running in our anatomy class. And we were all like, what is that? And it was him. And he was late. And so sometimes with autism, and I could be wrong, I don't know, I'm not a sped teacher, but sometimes isn't it like when their schedule gets thrown off, that's hard for them too?
Definitely. And I mean, especially right now with times of uncertainty changing, that's a huge thing right now for that population. Not all of them, but for a lot of them. And so that's a simple thing of, if people are aware, like classmates were aware, he obviously disclosed he had a disability. We're not getting into that conversation today, but if he disclosed and people are aware of it in the workplace, it allows them to be more understanding even of their teammates. So a lot of times our kids will disclose to their peers just because they know they need the additional help. Not always, but a lot of students, especially in health science, I feel have been really good about doing that, just because they need to rely on their peers to kind of help with those deficit areas.
Yeah. And it's really important too that you start, I guess, that process of preparing them. You know, healthcare, it never goes like it's supposed to. It's nothing is ever on time. Nothing ever works like it's supposed to. You kind of have to be a pessimist when you talk about that. And when you think about it, just plan on everything being an hour or 2 hours late. But that's something to kind of think about and prepare you for when you have the student in a classroom. So under your polls, we have scenarios, and I think they're called scenario 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're going to do as many as we can. We've got about 15 minutes, I think, give or take. So what I would like for you to do is you can just free text into that poll, and go ahead and kind of make your responses. I want to point out, number one, I'll make this into a PDF for those of you who can't download it. Also, all of this is accessible to you throughout the institute. So you could copy and paste someone's solution or idea if you thought that was a really good idea. This is about networking and bouncing ideas off of each other. You could copy and paste that. There's a notes section up there, and then your notes, you can export them and keep them. So that's something to think about. So we're going to say that we're teaching a clinical internship to a student that has autism. Their challenges are difficulty in interacting with other peers, poor communication and empathy skills, and we're going to say trouble with addition and subtraction. Is there a certain site that you would fit the student in? You know, clinical, we can do, as long as it's healthcare. So maybe, you know, maybe nursing ed wouldn't be appropriate, but maybe something in the healthcare would. Challenges that you foresee in that setting. What are some things that you definitely want to check that student off on before they go out? And what kind of communication would you need with that preceptor? So I'm going to give you just a little bit to just kind of type in there, and I'll see as the polls come through, maybe we can discuss a few of them. But I'll give you just a little bit to do that. Catherine, can you see the poll results too?
Not.
Okay. Some of you are saying you can't see the polls section. The poll, go back to your institute website. So where you get, you know, your agenda and you clicked on the session, go there, and then you'll see like a little tab and it says chat, people, polls. That's where it should be.
Yes, I can see those now.
Okay. I don't see any results, so I don't know if people are having problems or. So I guess while everyone is typing, just for the sake of time, I guess we could kind of go through a little bit of it and kind of do some different scenarios. And then you could always type in your poll, and then you could kind of bounce ideas off of each other and access them. Certain clinical site that would fit the student best. Well, obviously it depends on their goal, their career goal, but I was almost thinking, so like with addition and subtraction, maybe you could put them with like a personal trainer. Obviously there's some math you have to do for that. But I was thinking, or they could be like at the front desk of a gym, dietitian. Again, that's still some math. Maybe like a HUC, a medical secretary. Catherine, do you have any ideas?
Well, I was just even thinking the simple, not placement side, but even just like, don't be afraid to like use something as simple as a calculator. Opening that up to a student. I think a lot of times kids feel pressure. I sometimes feel pressure if I need to rely on a calculator and I'm trying to calculate some figures and percentages. So that was kind of where my mind immediately went.
I use a calculator
Yeah.
to this day still. Like, it's sad. I can't do math in my head. That's sad.
I think if they're doing something where they're making calculations and they're within a certain range, and it's like we talked about earlier, you can have a red, green, and yellow kind of, this is what would be serious reporting and things, but obviously they're going to be able to write these things down and there's going to be a supervisor there. Those are all things that are in place for any site.
Yeah, and also you could make them like a little cheat sheet, laminate it, put it in their pocket. Also, like different formulas. There are things I have to look up still to this day when I go out and work in the field. So, I mean, there's no shame in that. Assessments, depending on where they're going, my go-tos, they always have to do vitals. They always have to, be efficient in that, telling me ranges, interpreting vital sign results. I would definitely, with this student, want to do some communication role play. I may buddy them up with someone else. Those are some definite things that I would do. And as far as with their preceptor, Catherine, I mean, I wouldn't really be allowed to tell the preceptor that they have a disability, correct?
You could not. They would have to disclose, but then especially if they're under the age of 18, which, well, 18 on your placement. But no, you would not be allowed to. That would be up to the individual to decide if they would like to disclose.
Is there something like, if they have trouble communicating, could you say something like they are working on their communication skills, something to be aware? I mean, is there something you could say to kind of, or no?
I think you could definitely say, like this week we're focusing on our communication. We're trying to build those skills to strengthen them. Here's some ways that we can do that. I mean, and that's for any student. Again, we don't want to generalize so much on, we're focusing on how to include some of our special ed population, but I know lots of kids that have communication barriers sometimes. And so I think that even when you're doing additional lessons and you're preparing these students to go to sites, that's something that every single student in that classroom could really take advantage of.
Oh, yeah, they all struggle from that for sure. I think that's a good point. You can't, if you do have an autistic or a SPED student, you can't disclose that to your preceptor. So that's something to think about as well. We'll just go through these scenarios and then you all can type if you want. Nursing ed student, about to start clinical portion of the course, dyslexic and often has trouble reading large amounts of text, struggles with medical terminology and addition and subtraction. So, Catherine, what do you think as far as some things that maybe you could do for her?
Yeah, a lot of times, I'm not saying that all the information is not important. Please don't take it that way. But a lot of times, especially if you're able to highlight or pick out for a student, kind of chunking the text is a little bit easier. Even if you're allowed, some students might have trouble reading large amounts of text, but they can listen to it. So if you do like a loom of a voice recording of it, if you have a peer read it, if they're reading half and you're listening to half of it, a lot of times that even is going to help with their processing. And again, that's where you have to know your student and be in contact with their case manager. I am not an auditory learner. Like, I will tune you out. So if a student doesn't learn best by auditory and they're struggling with reading comprehension and things, that's not going to be a great solution. However, there are other ways that they can engage with that material. And I know that a lot of us supplement a lot of material together, but there are programs out there. I don't want to spend a great deal of time. Feel free to reach out if you have questions about that can still provide those services in a way that is going to be on their level, but they're still getting the information that they need.
Those are good points. The other thing that I really wanted to, I think we've got about 6 minutes. The other thing that I wanted to kind of make you think about is accommodations that you make along the way until they get to that capstone course. So let's say they're going into a rehab pathway in clinical health science rehab. You I don't know about you, but I feel like I develop a relationship with my students from health science on. You have them for, 3-4 years. You really know those students. So you kind of know what works well and what doesn't with that student. And things that you have to think about with learning disorder autistic students in those beginning classes so they're successful in their capstone class. So just the things that we've talked about, but starting early on and developing that rapport with them and maybe even their parents and encouraging them. Maybe I have a lot of students that are super excited and they will go home and they'll research stuff and hey, why don't you go ahead, we've done vitals, why don't you go ahead, if you can, if they'll bring the stuff back, take a blood pressure cuff, why don't you work on this at home over the summer. I don't know how it is with your school district about letting someone borrow something at home like that, but just encouraging that extra practice, I think, is good in the beginning. That way, when they get to that tier 3, they're really confident. I think confidence is a big portion of it too.
And remember, whatever you start in your introductory course, you've got to be able to sustain. So if you're accommodating, and that's where I think it's also, I think we have teachers in our school that do a good job of also kind of navigating with students exactly what they like about health science and where their career is leading them. Because sometimes they might go into it thinking they want to do something, and then realistically, you do have to sometimes have those tough conversations with students about placements and what their expectations are. I had one that I know was like dead set on clinicals, and it just wasn't the best fit, but then we were able to go a different route with her and focus more on the physical therapy side. So there's lots of avenues. So don't be afraid to experiment with those. Don't be afraid that you've kind of been pigeonholed with a student. Use your case managers, use your resources, and it's going to go a long way for a lot of these students.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I wanted to let y'all know that you have technically gone over. I am content to be here, of course, but at 1:20, the server is just going to cut us off. So y'all might want to, I'm sorry, not at 1:20, 1:25. So y'all might want to start wrapping up.
Okay, thank you. So just a few things. I will upload that PDF presentation. There also is a lesson plan template in there. It's the team lesson plan. If you wanted to make a lesson plan and upload it and share it, this is all about sharing and helping each other out. I myself am no expert on special education. That's what Catherine's here for. And there have been times that I've called her and asked her questions because I just don't know. And we're not even in the same school district. So I just think it's important that, we create all students, not just special ed, that, if you don't know the answer, you're resilient enough to find the resources to find the answer. Just like what she said with the calculator, I don't know everything. I'll tell my patients that I don't know the answer to that, but I know where to go and find it, and I can figure it out. And I think that's what's important for every student and special ed students, and just making sure that we're preparing all of them for healthcare the best that we can, because apparently the way things are going, we're going to need them. So that's really all I have to add. Catherine, do you have anything?
No, feel free to reach out. Nicki definitely is a guru in her area of specialty. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to even share if you had specific questions with our health science teachers too. I'm more than happy to share their contacts with you too if you needed that, just to kind of gain some more knowledge off. But again, Nicki's going to be a great resource for you as well.
All right. Well, we hope you all have a great weekend, and I don't know, hopefully we'll be in person soon next year.
And we're supposed to share a keyword with you. So the keyword is library.
Library.
Yeah.
Yep. That's how you get credit for the course. Our emails are on our profiles. Email us if you have any questions.
Okay, if there are no further questions, I am going to go ahead and end the meeting here. Just a reminder, the recording will be available and the chat will remain up until the end of the year, I believe.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good day.
Hey,
You
you
too.
as well.